Hello, Barry.
How you doing?
I'm really great, thanks. How are you?
Good. I always
Thanks for
wondered. I always wondered because cheers. That term. It's fascinating because we don't have that. We have hello or something, but never
yeah,
the cheers or whatever the hell it is. I'm always fascinated how language finds its different approach in different countries.
definitely. Well, being Scottish as well, I think it's got a particular sort of meaning for me. In terms of it's a way of us saying thank you for saying great. It's like it's really interesting. I love it. Um,
Yeah.
oh, congratulations on the Alto Knights. I just had a great time with your film. I thoroughly enjoyed it. Yeah.
Great.
Um,
That's nice.
And this is a character, I guess, that you've told a version of his story back with Bugsy, in terms of that man. But what was the attraction to Nick's script and this particular opportunity to sort of dive back into that era, I guess, in this world?
I mean, the Buzzy story, which is earlier, and a very different
Mm,
ability. Bugsy was into the glamour of it all, and the concept of Vegas as a dream. Mafia connected, but very, very different
mm,
character. Certainly, everything about it from the filming as well. He was, glamour was. Even the ad said glamour was the disguise. That's the way he focused. This differs very much in that you see the rise of two young boys, best friends, hanging around a mafia, place, and same sensibility. And as they grew older, they they became very different from one another. One
yeah.
was volatile and violent. The other one was much more introspective and thoughtful and almost a corporate sensibility. And then you see that clash, and then what happened because of that clash. So it's a very different type of a different story, I should say, of mafia connected characters.
Well, the idea was originally floated of Robert De Niro taking on the responsibility of both of these characters. What was your first kind of thought, and what was the excitement that you had about that opportunity?
Well, originally, uh, when we worked on the script, Nick Pileggi,
Mm,
when we began to really define Frank and Vito, and we gave the script to Erwin Winkler, who had been involved in it for years and years,
yeah.
and and he read it and loved it, and he said in a conversation I remember on the phone, he said, "What do you think about Bob playing both characters?" I said, "What? Vito and Frank." And I thought about it. I said, "Well, look, uh, we are talking about one of the great actors in the history of cinema." So it's not like I don't know if he knows how to do that. I said, "Well, let's see what Bob's reaction is." And Bob, responded and said, "Yeah, yeah, and that's how it all happened. That's how it began.
I
And
mean, it's so wonderful to watch those. I mean, there's not a lot of scenes where they're in it together, but when they are, it's such a gift to us to have, this man playing opposite himself so brilliantly. Um, yeah, it must have been. I mean, the enthusiasm you have for your craft. I mean, what a wonderful opportunity for you, in terms of to be capturing that.
it was, I'm the director, uh, and I'm also the audience.
Yeah,
And you would see certain moments, and you go, "Oh, that's good. That's something." And it didn't come like, "Okay, you show up and we're going to do this." You
mm,
know, uh, we discussed, the two of them, we worked on those scenes that they had together and tweaked it leading up to the actual shooting of it. So Bob didn't take it lightly. He understood the challenge. We would just refine it in terms of, the wording, and then eventually, we put it to the camera. One of the things that Bob said, which I thought was very helpful, he said, "Listen, I don't want to have like a script supervisor reading the lines off camera. I think I need a really good actor so that I'm really responding." And there was an actor that we had in the film, and he said so-and-so would be great. And so for those scenes, he would be Frank or he would be Vito, depending on that. And so I think the fact that he was such a good actor was important to Bob, that he really had a formidable off-camera character.
Yeah. It's quite a specific ask of someone, that, isn't it?
Yeah. I have to tell you, it was fascinating to watch.
I bet. And there's so many scenes that I could talk about within the film. There's one of many that I absolutely love, which is in the car when they're heading towards this big meet, with the Mormon conversation, which is just one of the great examples, I think, of the film in terms of the tonality of it, and that there are some really funny moments within this film, as well as it kind of being incredibly dramatic and tense. But those moments, that car scene is just so fantastic to watch.
Yeah. You can understand his sensibility. If you find the gold Bible, where are you going to the desert? He cannot comprehend that. And so it fits Vito's sensibility. This makes no sense. Just on that level, there's money to be made here. Why are we going to go to the desert, basically? And it was a wonderful little sequence to do. Yeah.
Now, I notice over your left shoulder, you have some gold and platinum discs hanging on the wall. And I'd love to talk to you about music, because you have the wonderful David Fleming, who scores the film, but he also has to have a really close relationship with the needle drops that feature throughout the film as well. So I was really interested to hear you talk about working with David and those kind of conversations you had with him.
He was terrific to work with. He came onto the project and immediately had a grasp of what we needed to accomplish in terms of the tonality of the music and how it plays out in terms of character behavior. We don't want it to be too melodramatic. We don't want to sell that. We don't want it to seem romantic, and so how do we blend that so we're not, in a sense, leading the audience in a sense of contradicting it? How do we, and so I thought he had a great sensibility. He wrote the script, not the script, the score very quickly. And he was, I can't say enough about him. I didn't know him prior. Actually, it was, it happened, and I couldn't be more pleased in that regard.
Yeah. And talk to me a little bit about those choices of the existing music, because that in itself, those choices, they kind of take us through the story musically, almost in a way, in terms of how music is evolving and changing as well. You have that great line where when we hear the Little Richard track, and so it's kind of there's music that's kind of beautifully used, kind of diegetically, whether it's in some of those old clips that we see, of the kind of the old kind of that era that I wish I'd been part of, where you have these performances with big bands and it's glorious. Yeah, so talk to me a little bit about all those wonderful pieces of music.
Music is getting so difficult nowadays because the cost of needle drops, is the term they like to use a lot, has become so expensive. And we didn't have that kind of budget, but we did try to find a way to support those scenes that needed to be done. And we also found some archival footage of the big band where we were able to intercut as well, that gave the energy and the sense of time. It's very important to the film in terms of its pacing and how we want to draw the audience into story. You know, so you just can't just be playing music. It has nothing to do with anything. You have to find a way to make a cohesive thing. And fortunately, at least in my mind, I thought we accomplished that, even though we struggle in terms of how to get the rights to certain things, because the way costs keep going up and up on archival material, musically, I should speak.
Yeah. It kind of slightly blows my mind, you know, but having a film where you've got double De Niro and yourself and Erwin Winkler involved, where people aren't falling over themselves to give you their music as well. How does that not happen? It's crazy.
It's look, at times the business is crazy, you know. So.
Yeah. Absolutely. But when do you start, you know, as a director, when do you start thinking about music? When does that kind of, you know, that thought process of what it's going to sound like start kind of for you?
I start thinking about music even when we're working on the drafts.
Oh, wow, great.
You know, because I begin to think about rhythm and what dynamics and how to in this particular case, how do we move through time? You know, so that happens. So that's how early on I'm always thinking about music. I can't separate it like, okay, now I got this. Oh, what should I do about music? I mean, it gets integrated very early on for me. Now I may change it 15 different times, but I'm always thinking of the rhythm of a film.
Yeah.
And so music is a big supporter of that. So it's very early on, even though, as I say, I may change my mind 10 times over, but I can't separate them out. And that goes back to the very beginning when I was writing a screenplay, that I would play certain songs over and over and over again while I was writing a script, because there was an energy in that music that I would get translated to the writing of a scene. So it goes way back to the way I sort of think of things.
Even the beautiful way that it's a companion to even the way the camera is moving in this film. You know, there's one kind of scene in particular that I was just kind of so like poetic and fluid and beautiful, is when we're in Frank's apartment and the camera just does like almost a 360 around him, and it's got this beautiful kind of like, it's almost as if you're walking around the room with him as well. And it's those moments as well of how the music can be a kind of like, it's almost the music for the dance of the movement of the camera in a way.
Yeah. It's some of that stuff, some of those things, you know, are thought of in advance, and sometimes it comes up very late, you know.
Yeah.
I might be just in the room and I'm walking around and I'm thinking, well, what do we do here? What else? What can we try? And because, look, to be honest with you, I know every director works in a different way, but for me, sometimes you have to explore, you know. So sometimes you'll try something and you push the film and you go, oh, too much. And then you go on the other side, no, that has no effect. And you just keep playing. You keep playing with that and try to sometimes define something that you can't define in advance. It's suddenly, and there's a discovery to a film. A film isn't just, okay, it's this, that. there is a discovery. Sometimes a performance, in a sense, shines a light in a way that you didn't even quite expect. And then you say, all right, so now how do I support that? How do I support that a little bit? And so you have to, at least for me, I have to be open to ideas that start to get into my head that will affect the film in some way that you may not at the very beginning. It's part of it, just you discover things at the same time.
What would you say was the biggest discovery in whilst making the Alto Knights then, in terms of, you know, listening to the film whilst you're making it, that you might have made changes on?
That's a good question. I'm not sure I can give you a specific. I do know that I felt that we needed to be able to integrate archival with our action, and how do we support it with the music.
Yeah.
And so the big band scene, I had in my head, something has got to happen here. I don't know what. We hadn't found that yet. And I was trying to figure out how can I get to this? And I would try certain things that I would put in there. And I remember at one time, I put a song from Chicago because it had a certain sound energy to it. Now I knew I couldn't use it because, you know, it's in the 70s and the 80s, you know, I can't use it. But there was something about it that its energy I thought would be right. So the question is, where is that? Where is that energy and something that would fit the period? And then you keep searching and searching, and then we ended up with what you see in the film.
That's great. I was also thinking about when you mentioned the kind of archival elements to the film. You know, you've got that archive, then you've got that kind of archive that you've had to create as well for the film. You know, in terms of these two characters. But then the other element to it as well is I love the almost narration sort of part of it, of, you know, the kind of the older version, you know, of Frank, and, you know, I really like that element of it. It's really intimate, it's really personable.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you like that. It was interesting somewhere along the line, and I can't remember, it all becomes a blur at times, is that you'd say, look, he's an old man now. And, you know, he's got this slide projector. And what can that tell us? He's just sort of looking at slides at random, you know, and what can that tell us as he's looking back? And that sort of weaved its way into the, you know, the overall, you know, piece.
Yeah.
And he becomes our storyteller, you know, not 100%, but the way it weaves its way in and out of the piece as he's looking back on the past.
Talking about the past, I was lucky enough last year to go to a concert here in London, which was a celebration of the music of Hans Zimmer, which Hans also came out and played guitar on. And Rain Man featured in that beautiful collection. And it was so wonderful to be reminded of that film through its music. And I just wondered if you would mind kind of reminiscing for a second about the experience of creating that part of the film with Hans. And
yeah, no, it's an interesting story, I think, anyway. Most road pictures, you know, have guitars in there. You know, they're always
yeah.
It's got guitars and things, and it's, you know, it's part of, like, you know, road picture. We're a road picture. And every time I put a piece of music where we had the guitars and things, it didn't feel right. And so I kept playing music against the picture, and nothing it didn't feel right. And, I was talking to my wife, and I said, there's another sound, and I don't know what it is, but it's it's something different than, traveling music. You don't know what it is. And so anyway, she went to see some film, and I forgot the name of it now. I was thinking about A World Apart. I can't remember the name. And she said, there's some kind of music in it, sort of like what you've been sort of abstractly talking about. And I said, well, I have to hear it. And so I listened to it. I went, oh, this is interesting. And who's the composer? And it was Hans Zimmer. As it turns out, we had to go to London for something, which I cannot remember anymore. It's so long ago. And so I said, oh, I got to go meet this Hans Zimmer. And I went to meet him, and he had speakers everywhere, It was like a madman here. And I said, my problem, the guitars doesn't seem right to me, and this doesn't right or whatever. And so he started playing some things they were sort of drum kind of pieces, all kinds of crazy drums he had with all kinds of things he's playing. And it's like, interesting. And so I ended up, hiring him to do the score. And so it developed, and then it became what you heard. There are no strings or whatever, all of that. Now here's the crazy part of it. When we were having an early screenings, and I had some people that work with autistics, etc., doctors, etc., all that. And so one of them said, how did you know that autistics, those who are autistic, don't respond to strings? I said, I didn't know that. He said, no, they don't. They respond to much more percussion type of things.
Rhythm. Mm.
And the rhythms. And I said, I didn't know it. I just couldn't hear this. The strings seemed wrong. And so by accident, I stumbled onto, and if you listen to it, it's got da, ba, 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 da, da. That's what it is. It's all percussion, the whole entire thing, which Hans did. And that's how it happened. And so there's sometimes you have to trust your instinct, even though you don't understand where this is going. You know what I mean? It's like a journey, and you don't know, well, where am I going with this? How can I not have it? Why does this song work? Why doesn't that? And that's in a sense how that happened. And Hans just nailed it. Again, just writing what he was writing. And we had a great, we've worked on different films. He was very helpful on this one here, because when I was saying about the composer, and he was busy at that point in time, but he recommended David Fleming, and that's how David Fleming came aboard.
Brilliant. Barry, I could chat to you for hours. It's so lovely. Thank you for giving me such a beautiful insight into films, old and new, and long may they continue. Sorry, it's a treat to get time with you. Thank you so much.
Well, this was fun. I enjoyed it.